afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our work session. Councilmember Harrison and the mayor are absent and excused, and I believe Councilmember Patton will be joining us right now. We have one item on our agenda. It is an update on the S line, and so I will turn it over to y'all.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, Kenneth Ritchie with Transportation. Here today to introduce Jason Ortner, the Rail Director with NCDOT. He is here today to provide an update on the S-Line Raleigh to Richmond project. As you may recall, late last year, this project was awarded $1.09 billion to help deliver the first phase of that, which will establish intercity passenger rail service between Raleigh and Wake Forest. Really the start of trying to fill a missing link in the kind of that southeast high-speed rail corridor. So with that, I will pass it over to Jason.
Good afternoon, members of council. Really a privilege to be here and brief you on a project that's one of the big premier transportation projects in North Carolina, right here in the community of Raleigh. Before I begin, I'd like to just briefly give an update on our efforts in Western North Carolina, because literally most of the department is focused on the recovery efforts there, and our hearts go out to everybody affected by the storm. Nearly every division of the DOT is involved. We have over 2,000 employees dispatched to Western North Carolina and 1,100 pieces of heavy equipment involved in restoring the roadway network and working with the communities. We've opened over 450 of the road closures to date, but we still have 630 road closures in Western North Carolina that we're working through. And we've determined that over 100 bridges will have to be replaced in Western North Carolina as part of our efforts. So not only are we doing that, we're working with our transit systems out there to make sure that the folks that are mobility challenged have access and are being provided food and other resources through those means. And our aviation division is also working with all the different air support systems, including the civilian air patrol, to do drop-ins and support those services there as well. We're also working with the railroads, as you may imagine. It is about 100 miles out of service in Western North Carolina, so it's a significant amount of effort in Western North Carolina. It's going to take a long time for us to work to recover that. So just want to make sure you're aware that that's very much top of mind for NCDOT as we continue to go out the usual business of running the department as well. I'll begin my presentation by just kind of talking about the service that we're going to provide through this S-Line project. I know that this has been something we've been talking about with the city for over 20 years, really coming up on 25 years, this project. It is a project of great significance, and I'm going to go into detail about exactly what the project will do. But one thing I did want to mention is the type of rail service that is initially being proposed as part of this service, and that is our intercity passenger rail service that we call NC by Train here in North Carolina. It's a service operated by Amtrak. It is a service that connects the centers of cities and towns together. If you've ridden our Piedmont service that operates right out of here in Raleigh going towards Charlotte, or one of the other Amtrak services that go all the way to Florida or to the eastern North Carolina up to Washington, D.C. Northeast, that is the type of service that we're talking about providing. It is a longer trip duration type service, and baggage and food service is typical. Now, I know a lot of folks have heard about commuter rail, which is another important rail product that's provided to move people, but this is typically a shorter distance rail service that historically has just connected outlying areas to urban centers. And it's been focused historically on peak hour service in addressing congestion and traffic on area roadway networks to ensure that people have mobility to get into job centers. The station spacing is closer under this type of service, and there are shorter trip durations. North Carolina does not have this type of rail service yet, although Charlotte is talking about it right now with the Red Line project connecting the northern parts of Mecklenburg into Charlotte. There's also light rail. You may have heard of light rail before. Charlotte actually does have a light rail service. Their link service is this service. It is a separate service entirely from the national rail network, so it operates as an independent rail system separate from like rail and traditional passenger rail service. So just to give you some context on the type of service that we're talking about here with what we're going to provide in the S-Line initially. This is our current service map for North Carolina passenger rail services that are intercity passenger rail. You can see a lot of density in service between Raleigh and Charlotte. That's been a heavy amount of focus, and that's been a very successful system. But we also operate daily service from Charlotte through Raleigh to New York City via the Carolinian service as well. Amtrak also provides national long-distance services through North Carolina. There are actually 4 different services that operate through Greensboro and down through Charlotte, going towards Atlanta and New Orleans, as well as right through Raleigh to Florida and up to the D.C., and also through Rocky Mount, Wilson, Selma, and Fayetteville on those lines is there. And then also connecting throughway motor coach service in eastern North Carolina. That's the current connection from eastern North Carolina to the rail service. We call this the starter kit of passenger rail in North Carolina. We've been at it for 30 years. We're one of the most successful systems, but what's exciting is that we're now seeing, because of the federal funding opportunities, a way to really reach more North Carolinians than ever before with passenger rail. A great story that is represented the data that we receive is just how many people are riding our trains now. One of the things that we like to point out is, as of last year, end of calendar 23, we were already 38% higher than 2019 ridership. So that was the last full year before the pandemic. So what we are seeing is the trends are that folks really want passenger rail service. They really want to use us as a productive, safe, comfortable way to travel between our city centers without a vehicle. If you don't have a vehicle on one end of your trip or on both ends of your trip, this is a great way to get between your points of destination. This year, we think will be 50% higher than 2019, because as you can see, already through September, we're already approaching our 2023 numbers. So we're really excited about just how many people are using train service in North Carolina right here connecting through Raleigh. And the future is super bright, because in December of last year, the Federal Railroad Administration awarded us 7 new corridors throughout North Carolina and connecting to our neighbors to the south and north to expand passenger rail service. What is really interesting about this map, as you see, is there is one location that is critically important that connects all these nodes together, and that is Raleigh. Right here in the center of the state, we will have services, as these corridors are developed, radiating as far as west as Asheville, as far east as Wilmington, down to important communities like Fayetteville, Winston-Salem that currently doesn't have direct passenger rail service, and other communities throughout the state. Really exciting. This map represents new service to as many as 30 new different communities around North Carolina, and also represents our ability to grow our ridership tremendously over, by 2040. We also have 5 corridors that we're in the process of preparing for future additional services, extending south to Hamlet and potentially to Columbia, South Carolina, over to Greenville, to Morehead City, and then along the existing lines up to Weldon and points north that way. So all these services will connect right here at Raleigh. If you're in Raleigh, you could literally go anywhere, not just in North Carolina, but in the southeast as we develop this system. So that brings us to the S-Line. The S-Line is sort of the link in the system that connects that entire North Carolina system to the broader southeast. Virginia has a very robust passenger rail system that connects Washington, D.C. down through Richmond, Petersburg, and out to the peninsula area of Norfolk and Newport News. And as I mentioned before, we have a very robust and successful system from Raleigh over to Charlotte and that system. What's missing is a connection between those two systems. One that would be a high volume, high capacity, high speed, and high reliability corridor that will enable passengers coming to and from North Carolina into the Triangle region to do that effectively. So that really is what we're focused on with this project, and has certainly gained the attention of FRA. We were one of the largest awardees of federal grant funds in this last round, only behind a project between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and another project in California. We were the third largest. So I'll talk more about that as we get along here. So I think everybody knows our area, our region is growing tremendously. And as you look at all of the East Coast mega regions, which currently represent about 20 million people between the DC larger metro area, the area around Richmond, and around the Chesapeake area, Norfolk, Newport News, and Portsmouth, and then into North Carolina with over 6 million people in our state. That whole region is expected to grow to 25 million by 2040. So finding new ways, and effective ways to move people in a way that they can remain productive and they can move safely is something that really we have our attention on, and so does the US DOT and our partners to the north. The route will save over an hour in travel time between North Carolina and Virginia. It really cuts off a lot of the travel time and distance between those 2 points. But because it's a separate corridor from where the heavy freight traffic will exist, it will also be much more reliable because it will be more dedicated to passenger. There'll still be freight traffic on it, but the predominant service would be passenger rail traffic. It'll become the backbone of this regional multimodal connected system, which will also include other types of transportation modes, that both will be in the corridor and connect to the corridor. It's critical to further expanding that passenger system I showed you on the previous slide. It also provides freight rail network resiliency by providing another route north and south in North Carolina. As we see natural disasters and other things, affect our transportation systems, resiliency is a very important part of the transportation networks to make sure that we can continue to move people and goods even when we have certain links in the system down. The environmental benefits of passenger rail go without saying. It's the most efficient ground transportation mode on Earth. And then it will also expand service to more non-vehicular, disadvantaged, and underserved regions in North Carolina and Southern Virginia as well. So one thing is for sure, we've been at this for a long time. We've been working on this project really ever since the US DOT announced that it was a designated corridor within their map of nationwide high-speed rail corridors, and that designation came in 1992. So we began work as a DOT with the communities, with the FRA and other folks to begin the hard work of environmental analysis on the full length of the corridor. In 2002, we finished a document with the FRA that cleared the whole corridor from Charlotte to Washington, D.C. That particular Tier 1 record of decision said the route will follow the S-line and come through Raleigh over to Charlotte. We immediately began a Tier 2 environmental analysis that took us 15 years to complete. 162 miles of detailed environmental analysis just on the railroad side, also 82 miles of roadway that was analyzed as part of that process, working with dozens and dozens of communities to come to the conclusion, including the city of Raleigh, coming to the conclusion of this is the route and this is the specific alignment of the corridor that we're going to build as part of this process. That decision, record of decision, made this project competitive for the grants that we are now receiving because it said to the US DOT, this project is ready for funding, to take it to the next level. So on the heels of that, we won in 2020, we won a $48 million grant for the corridor purchase. And then subsequently, we worked with communities all up and down the line to begin a transit-oriented development process, working with a lot of the smaller communities to make sure that they were ready and prepared for the rail system to come and ensure that their development patterns and land use patterns would match, the opportunity that the rail line would provide. And then in '22, we won a grant to begin the 30% preliminary engineering process, which is really exciting because that's the first time we were able to actually get real dollars to begin the hard work of land survey and the type of work that needs to be done to do the specific detailed engineering and analysis to design what is exactly going to be built within the corridor. Also that year, we won a $3.4 million RAISE grant for mobility hubs. That was a follow-on from the TOD grant that allowed us to start furthering the process of working with communities up and down the line on where their station would be and how it would connect with their intermodal network. And then finally, the largest grant that DOT has ever won on a federal level, the $1.1 billion for the federal-state partnership grant last December, where we all celebrated together at Raleigh Union Station. And what an amazing time that was with the Secretary of Transportation and others in attendance right here in the city of Raleigh. So what does that grant do? It does something very big. It builds the first and most complex segment of the entire line between Raleigh and Richmond. Really, with a project of this size, you've got to build it in segments. It's not any different than highway projects, from that perspective. You build and you extend service once you have that project built. So this is not any different. This is the most complicated 18 miles of the whole corridor, coming out of downtown city of Raleigh, connecting right to Raleigh Union Station and going into the heart of Wake Forest. So connecting two large population centers. And then the outcome is really the extension of the Piedmont service, which currently stops at Raleigh Station, and taking those same trains and up to Wake Forest as our initial service concept. So it's a $1.4 billion total project. We have the $1.1 billion federal grant. We have about $0.2 billion, which was our state-funded STIP projects that were part of the match of that project, and then another roughly $1.1 billion in partner funding from Amtrak and other partners. It supports the final design, right-of-way, and construction of this 18-mile segment. And you can see some of the grade separations, which are those roadway projects along this segment here that are being built as part of this. It is going to be up to 110-mile-an-hour railroad, and so we're trying to do it as safely as possible. And one of the first places you start is removing the road crossings from the network, just like you would an interstate highway. So we've been working very closely with the city staff, with the town of Wake Forest, and with other stakeholders, both internally and externally at DOT, to make sure we're designing this project right and consistent with the record of decision that we already received in 2017, which had these specific elements included. Raleigh Union Station is the hub of the statewide network. So one aspect of this project is to make the necessary improvements at Raleigh Station to ensure that when you're here in Raleigh, you can get on trains to nearly everywhere. So a part of that is building a new platform on the S line, as you can see in the graphic here. And maybe I can draw on this thing. Let's see here. This is the location of the new platform. The existing platform is right here. That's where we currently board trains today. The platform to the north will be oriented to where the S line goes, because what you want is trains not making backup moves and forward and backwards, because that takes a lot of time. It also eats up the capacity of the railroad. So by building this new platform to the north of Raleigh Union Station, which was part of its original plan, we can now board trains at both locations. And as we expand the state's passenger rail network, this will be critically important because there will be trains coming in from everywhere. This literally doubles the capacity of the facility. It's an important component here. One thing that, if you've been to Raleigh Station, you know that the platform is high compared to the track, and you can walk right onto the train. The same type of platform will be built here at this new location. And so you can see the limits are from north of Morgan Street through Hargett Street to the south. That's the location of that new platform. And there will be concourses and other types of infrastructure that actually connect all that together as part of the larger Raleigh Union Station campus. do this. There we go. You may have heard, we are already underway with construction with elements of this project. Durant Road was the first project in the overall Raleigh to Richmond program to go to construction. We had a groundbreaking ceremony on July 1st, and the Secretary of Transportation also came down for that event as well as the governor was there to celebrate that great milestone. And so we'll start to see the actual construction of that new bridge over the tracks at Durant Road begin very, very shortly. And you can also see on this map there are other projects that are also start up. New Hope Church Road, just north of the Beltline, near Atlantic Avenue and between Atlantic and Falls and News. That project will let to construction this month. So we'll start to see work in 2 different locations of the city as part of this network, as part of the early work. These were some of the STIP projects that were already funded through our state program that provided the match for the federal grant. Very important. Millbrook Road is also on here. We expect that to be around sometime in 2026. And then in Wake Forest, Rogers Road is expected in 2025. Now I'm just going to take you through just a little bit of detail. These are maps in the next few slides that are actually our 2015 public design maps that were the actual maps that were shown to the public at that time when we were completing the federal environmental process and the record of decision. And really, so I'm really just sharing this with council to make sure that you're aware this is what was previously shown, and this is the basis of which we're doing the current design today. So these maps, they are oriented so that north is to the left. So this is the warehouse district, and this map basically shows you that we're doing track improvements from the Boylan Bridge, a very famous City of Raleigh landmark, new tracks that will go underneath that bridge. We'll have, as I showed before, there will be the new platform that basically will go here in that location from the previous map. That new platform goes across Hargett Street and underneath Morgan Street, and also underneath Hillsborough Street. And then the track continues going this direction, following from Jones Street across North Street and Lane Street as it goes north, following West Street. And I'll show you that in the next map. But I wanted you to show that this was the original layout and design approved in 2017 as part of a record of decision. I'll go to the next map. So this is the next map to the north. Again, the north is to the left on your drawing there. We're building a new bridge that essentially extends from North Street all the way to Peace Street, basically paralleling West Street and the Norfolk Southern line in that area. And then it extends south or north of Peace Street, and I'll draw here for a minute. It extends north of Peace Street to where it will cross Capitol, I think that's Pigeon House Creek, and the future park here on a new structure at this location here. That puts the new track, which is really separate from the freight network, over onto the east side of Capitol Boulevard as you continue north, and I'll show you where that goes in the next drawing. So in this map, you can see the corridor essentially follows what is essentially the DOT rail yard. If you've seen the trains up on the hill, that is where on the bottom right of this drawing. Let's see if I can get this. Yeah, this is our facility here. On the bottom right of the drawing, it will extend and follow CSX essentially north of to the north until it crosses Capitol Boulevard at this location right here, in between the the Wake Forest Road and the railroad bridge there. From that point to the north, it essentially follows the CSX line all the way to Wake Forest. But I wanted to highlight this specific area for council because this is different than, it's not on the same alignment as the existing railroads. And there's a reason for that. One is we needed to separate this particular track from the freight railroad networks, which are handling lots of freight business, and also provide a grade separated corridor, in other words, a corridor that doesn't cross highway streets at grade. So it's not, for instance, I'll go back to the previous map. This is West Street and Harrington Street. This corridor is not crossing, the new trains will not cross West and Harrington Street. They will follow this other corridor. That was an important thing I wanted to point out. On schedule, we are, I'll say that the target is to have Wake Forest service in place by 2030. So that is a very big sprint to get a project of this size to Wake Forest on that timeline. So we are working very, very efficiently and very quickly to try to advance this project on that timeline. My boss, Julie White, tells me transportation projects take too long. We're going to do this one fast as we can. And so what we're working on is expedited a schedule as we can to deliver the service that we've promised to the constituents. Our PE and right-of-way process is basically taking us through 2026. That's the preliminary engineering and the preparation of right-of-way plans and then working with property owners. Roadway construction, as I mentioned in my previous slides, is already starting with the Durant Road project, and that will extend all the way through 2032 because there are some roadway projects that will extend past the time that we actually have service in place for the trains. And then the railroad construction starting in earnest in 2026 and extending through 2030 when we actually start service. And then service starting in 2030 and beyond. I will also mention that we're not just focused on finishing this one segment to Wake Forest. We're also pursuing additional funding and through the US DOT and partners to extend Wake Forest and continue to build the project north. So that strategy will continue even as we're building out this particular segment of the work. Critical to the project is ongoing public involvement and coordination. That includes coordination with our business owners, coordination with our important stakeholders in the community, and elected officials. So we have been, as I mentioned before, we've been at this project a very long time, and we are committed to continuing close coordination with all of the partners on this project. Our Federal Environmental Impact Statement, as I mentioned previously, was completed in 2017. That had a huge amount of public involvement associated with it, but given that it was finished in 2017, we have an absolute obligation to continue to communicate with those that are impacted and affected by the project and communicate the status and timeline and what it's doing. So with that, we're going to be doing workshops and community outreach. Those things are already in place with a heavy amount of effort and moving towards some very specific workshop opportunities in the new year, in the first part of the new year as we get some updated designs. So we are committed to doing that. Right now, we are doing some corridor engineering surveys and soils analysis. So we are already communicating that we have some survey crews out there, as I mentioned, just making sure that we can pick up all the different points of needed for the preliminary engineering and analyzing the soils, which is when you're building bridges, knowing what is in the ground is absolutely important. So that is part of that process. It doesn't mean that every place that they test the soil is exactly where something's going to be built, and we've been communicating, but it is really important for us to get it right and make sure we have it all documented. We'll be following the federal process for right-of-way acquisition, and that we expect that to begin next year in 2025. And then construction anticipated to start in 2026 in earnest along the rail corridor. And thank you, members of council. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilmember Fort.
It's not so much a question, but I guess on your last slide where you're talking about community input, since it's 2017 was when you finished it, it's about 7 years ago, and we since then have opened up an office of community engagement. I would suggest to you that y'all have Taisha and her group be involved, because I'm sure a lot has changed in that area since 2017. So just kind of making sure that you're, getting good touch points with folks in the community who may be, pretty active around this particular area.
We'll be sure to do that, council member, yes.
Anybody else? Councilmember Patton, and then Councilmember Jones.
Hi. These are all great updates. Couple questions. So it sounds like riders will be able to ride from Wake Forest to downtown Raleigh or reverse in 2030. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes,
Did
council.
I understand that right? Okay. And then I just wanted to check, is this a replacement service or an additional service to the communities Selma, Wilson, Rocky Mount that are currently served? They will still be served? This is an additional line?
It is an additional service, yes. Yeah, absolutely. The Carolinian service will continue to operate over the route you just mentioned. This will just be an extension of the Piedmont service up to Wake Forest.
Got it. And then east to west, the service to Wilmington and Asheville, would you describe those as like 10 years away, 20 years away?
That is a very good question. So what Federal Railroad Administration, who's our partner, our funding partner in this, is to say it takes 7 to 12 years to get from concept to actual implementation on a project. As you just saw in my presentation, we have been at this project for a very, very long time. It is a much larger project than some of those other projects. But we anticipate with that corridor identification process, we'll be going through a number of the same steps. And so 7 to 12 years is typically what they take. Some will go faster, some will go slower. It really depends on the available funding, because rail doesn't have a federal formula funding, to support its activities. It's all competitive discretionary grants. Fortunately, we're really good at winning those grants, but it does require non-federal matching funds, and so that's something we're always looking at. But that will drive a lot of the schedule.
Got it. And then one last one. There's going to be a stop at Gresham Lake, right? Is it?
So this project, the initial project, is downtown Wake Forest to downtown Raleigh, and it's focused on delivering the corridor. There is opportunity, once we have this project in place and the corridor in place, to have other types of overlay services. But FRA is looking at the initial project to be really intercity focused, which is more of that distance. But it does not replace any opportunity for additional stops along the way as other services are added on this corridor.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Jones?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I have a few comments and then just one question. First of all, thank you for your response to Western North Carolina. That is crucial. And as somebody who's from Orlando and my family's about to go through this with Milton, I hope that Florida has the same response that you guys have. So I'm really proud of the work that you are showing in partnership with our fellow community. So thank you for that. Excuse me. I would like to ask a question about the Hargett Street. So when we get with the S line, we had a big conversation recently, and we'll finish it up next week, about Red Hat and South Street closure that we are doing as a city. And in that conversation, it has also come up that this in the future is going to close. Can you review, because the other one is Cabarrus. I know that's not here, but is there any way that we can just talk about what sections will be closed due to this project?
Absolutely, council member. So yes, Hargett Street was part of that original record of decision because we knew that the Raleigh Union Station improvements would be pretty significant in that area. The number of tracks, the fact the platform actually has to extend through that location. So if you can imagine, between the platform being 4 feet higher than the track, and the track having a very deep elevation, and then below the track is the concourse, there's a lot of space taken up by just that particular improvement. So Hargett Street was an early identified need, for that particular purpose. So that one, that's why that one is indicated as such. The Morgan Street Bridge is not being closed permanently. It has to be modified. So part of that process will be looking at that bridge to make sure that as we modify it, and specifically where the piers come down, because they're not in conflict with where tracks need to be, as we rebuild that, we work with the city staff to make sure that any accommodations for the pedestrians and for the other users of that bridge are accommodated as well. To the north of there, Jones Street also is an area of tremendous complexity for the tracks, because that is the entranceway for all the trains and the tracks that will come into Raleigh Union Station. The overlapping switches and the difference in elevation means that crossing can't stay in place. But included in the 2017 design is a pedestrian accommodation at that location to build some kind of facility to replace that crossing with pedestrian and other types of active transportation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And lastly, it's just another comment. I have last year used the Carolinian to get to DC and to New York with my family, and it was phenomenal. So I'm really, really excited for the work that you guys are doing in that connection and making it simpler. And I look forward to when this is finally complete in however many years that takes. But thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Councilmember Branch.
I just want to say thank you for the work you've been doing. I've been in many meetings from Sanford to Wake Forest and Raleigh discussing this, and thank you for the touch points and continued communication, because I think that's very vital to the community and everyone else. So I just look forward to these 18 miles being completed, with me stating that from Wake Forest north, how many more miles is that, and what is the long-term time frame to reach the Virginia line? Right.
So excellent question. The distance from the Wake Forest to the state line is roughly 60 miles. As you can imagine, it gets simpler the farther north you build, because we're out of the significant urban area of both Raleigh and Wake Forest. Again, the timeline is dependent on funding more than anything else, because with the record of decision in place, all of the basis of the ability for USDOT to fund the project is there, and quite frankly, if we have the funding to do it, which requires both a non-federal match, to support the federal ask, then that work can really be dovetailed into what we're already doing. The PE grant that we have takes us all the way to downtown Richmond. So we have 30% engineering funded all the way to Richmond, and we're working with Virginia very closely on that piece. What we need to do is just continue to build this in segments and apply for those segments. So that really is what it comes down to. We think that we could take advantage of efficiencies in the current project status as we continue to win funds. We're just working to make sure we have the appropriate matching funds to support those federal grants.
Thank you. I just want to add a couple things. You were saying a lot of stuff that was really exciting about Raleigh being the hub for the Southeast, for rail connections. I think when we have our bus rapid transit up and running and everything sort of flowing through Raleigh, it's going to be so much easier for folks to get around without a car, regardless of where you're going. Councilmember Patton and I were at an event in Wake Forest a few weeks ago, and I know they're really excited. And I was also excited about the idea that I could get there without having to drive down Capitol in the future. And folks will always say to us, why do we not have train service in Raleigh? We do. And I think the more people who realize that NC by Train operates regionally, the better. Now we're at a couple hours that the trains are coming, and I'm assuming if our ridership continues to exceed expectations, we'll get some more frequency, and that makes it even more dependable. And I think having connections to Winston-Salem and Asheville and Wilmington will be critical. I recently had to go to an event in Winston-Salem. I took the train to Greensboro, then I Ubered, because it was just easier to do that. But ways that we can link people together, North Carolina is going to continue to see population growth this region, and the sustainable way to grow is to give people options. And so I'm really excited about all of this. Hopefully our BRT will be up and running by 2030, and that can supplement this service. So I look forward to future updates, and if there's nothing else from the table, okay. Councilmember Black, did you have anything? You're good?
I did, but everybody asked it already.
Okay, well, we're all excited and supportive. Thank you for being here. And that's all we have for our work session today, so we are adjourned until public comment at 7.